sniper. There was me and another guy, and a round went straight between the heads, and it was so close I felt the shockwave of the round. All I wanted to do since I was about 7 years old was be a paratrooper. And there was a massive attack. It was daytime, which is unusual. They put in a concerted effort to swamp us and take us all out. A little bit of an open area that we're approaching from, and we're trying to attack us. And we... Coming from! We put in a shed load of firepower onto it with 50 cals and GPMGs. I mean, all you saw was these strike marks from 50 cals and the tracer going down range. It was just amazing. And they got their ass handed to them. We kicked their asses. Wow. I've always been a big fan of the LRDG. Yeah. They were an absolutely amazing unit. And yeah, it was very, very similar to what we were doing later on in the tour, to be honest. Long range patrols in vehicles, tooled up with loads of weapons. And we had to drive in soft vehicles through an urban area, which is a massive recipe for disaster. And I was 100% expecting to die. I thought I was going to get killed. And I was on the GPMG, basically sweeping every potential ambush point. A friend of mine, I lived right next to him in the block. We were in the same patrol in Kosovo and Macedonia. He was an aggressive paratrooper, taking on the enemy, taking a fight to them, you know. And yeah, when I heard about his name come up on the casualty thing, that was really sad, yeah.
Is it still a garrison town to this day? Or?
It is, yeah, but obviously all the town regiment have gone now.
So who's here now?
A lot of Gurkhas.
All right.
And I think there's a guards battalion. And there's RLC as well.
Yeah, all right, and the Royal Logistics Corps.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
But yeah, they're all different. It's like different logos.
Ah, yeah. Little tour of Aldershot with Tom and Joe.
So,
Trafalgarin.
Yeah, this is the last airborne problem.
Wow.
So, it's pretty cool.
We are on the Aldershot original training grounds of the Parachute Regiment.
Used to do the 10 miler here, the log race, all those sort of events before you went on to the Bracken. Well, so this is Long Valley here. As you can see here.
Beautiful.
And this is where peak of and this was the first water stop, right where we stood here. And this is the highest point on the training area.
That BBC series from 83, the Paras, are legendary.
Yeah. So this is the area where you get beasted.
Fantastic. Well, we've just made our way up here with all the kit. We're going to start filming in a minute. Yeah. Tom, thank you so much for doing this, mate, and appearing on the channel. How's it going?
Yeah, really good. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Now, before we get into the core of today's interview, where are we at the moment?
Right, so we're in Aldershot. We're at the training area where I actually did a lot of my early training days and stuff.
Yeah.
So this is on Flagstaff Hill in Long Valley in Aldershot.
Fantastic. It's 20 years since Herrick IV in Helmand, when the British Army faced combat intensity unlike anything it had faced for decades. And that is going to be the main subject of today's conversation. This is being recorded in July of 26, so it literally is 20 years ago. That's where you were, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
However, before we go into that summer of 2006, could you tell us a bit about your background?
Okay, yeah, so my name's Tom. I joined the army when I was 16, straight into junior para. I served for 25 years regular army in a parachute regiment in 1 para, Pathfinders, Red Devils. And I then left the army, did another 8 years in the reserves in 4 para, and I now work at a school where I train cadets, school Combined Cadet Force.
And of course, you've got the First in Events company.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm a big fan. I've done a number of events. I'm definitely going to do another one this year. We'll talk a little bit about that.
Yes, so established a thing called First in Events a few years ago, about 4 years ago now. And the whole basis of that is military-themed events. So based on a lot of stuff that I did in the military, like the P Company event, the fan dance, survival weekends, navigation training, skydiving, that sort of stuff. Yeah, so it's coming along quite well. And yeah, we run things in different locations all around the country, and we come out with relatively new events each year, pretty much now. So this year we'd be running an escape and evasion course as well.
Oh, excellent.
So that'd be pretty cool.
When is that? What month?
That's at the end of August.
I think I'm going to, I think I'll be on that one actually.
Yeah, cool.
You also obviously have the Prepared Pathfinder YouTube channel. It's one of the channels that really inspired me.
Yeah. So yeah, I started that a few years ago, probably about 4 or 5 years ago. It wasn't a planned thing really. It was done as a result of, I was in a cadet training team at the time, and it was during COVID, and we weren't allowed to visit the units to conduct training. So we was asked to make videos for to keep their interest and to continue training. And the result of doing a few of those videos, somebody just said to me, "Have you thought about making a YouTube channel?" And I was like, "Not really," but then, with COVID going on, it helped, keep myself busy and kept me focused with certain things. So that kind of grew arms and legs as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Taking it back a bit, what made you want to join the Parachute Regiment?
Right, so all I wanted to do since I was about 7 years old was be a paratrooper. That was it. I didn't want to just join the army. I wanted to be a paratrooper. I think it may have been a result of some of the films I watched growing up. Things like The Eagles Landed and The Wild Geese.
Yeah.
Films like that. And also reading the Commando books with pictures of, comic strips of guys jumping out of aeroplanes and fighting the enemy and stuff. But also, I wanted to be the best I could be.
Yeah.
So I wanted to join the regiment that was hardest to get in, that was the best out there. And actually, when I was 11 years old, they had the Paris series on TV. And I watched that, and it kind of scared the crap out of me because it showed how tough it was.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I still thought, that's what I want to do. And the Falklands as well was at the same time, 1982. Yeah. And a lot of the battles there were fought by 2 and 3 para, and obviously they performed incredibly well out there, and that inspired me as well.
We were just standing on top of that hill because I'm one of the people that really enjoyed that series, the Paras from '83. It's on YouTube, but it's actually on BBC iPlayer. People want to watch it. Yeah. But walking up here, most of that was actually done right here, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is Flagstaff Hill. I think this is about the 5 mile, about the halfway point of the 10 miler. This was the first water stop they did, or we did, and it was all performed around this area. So P Company originally was just done in Aldershot. So they did a 3-day P Company that all the events were here, and this is one of the central points right here.
Awesome. No, brilliant. You mentioned Pathfinders. Obviously, your channel is called Prepared Pathfinder. For people who don't know, what is a Pathfinder?
Okay, so Pathfinders were formed in World War II. There was 2 companies, 21st Company, 22nd Independent Companies. They were assigned to each of the airborne divisions, and their role was to literally jump in ahead of the main force, secure a drop zone, and then mark the drop zone for the main force jumping in. Once everyone else had dropped in, they were then given secondary tasks to perform after that. Since the Second World War, the role has evolved a little bit, and it's more like it's kind of like a special forces role. So you're an advanced force, and you're not just there to mark drop zones or helicopter landing sites now, or landing zones. You're also there to perform raids, ambushes, targeting high value targets, reconnaissance, so information gathering, that sort of thing. So you work in small teams, normally a 6-man team, or multiples of 6, depending on what's going on, and you go ahead of everyone else, like say information gathering, and then carrying out strikes and ambushes and things like that.
In preparing for this interview, I read the book by Steve Heaney and Damien Lewis called Ex-Platoon, in which he describes the Pathfinder starting all the sort of the black economy in the mid-80s, no budget, no kit, stuff like that. So by the time you joined, well, first of all, did you know Steve Heaney? And second of all, did that culture of sort of black economy and scrounging your own kit, did that still exist?
So Steve Heaney I know really, really well.
All right.
He was a senior full corporal in the platoon when I first joined in 1995. He'd been there for a few years, and he was one of the main DS on the Cadre when I did the Cadre. And he was a very, very professional, very fit, good guy, great soldier. And he used to take some of the tabs that we get thrashed around this area, this very area we're on now, 8 milers and 10 milers and stuff like that, before we went down to Brecon for the main part of the Pathfinder selection. So I know Steve very well. Like I say, great soldier, really good guy.
Great book as well. I'll put a
He's written two actually. So
say again?
He's written 2 books.
Oh, is he? Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's written one called Ex-Platoon. I think I can't remember, Operation Certain Death, I think he called it, the second.
Now you mention it, I'll put the cover up there. Because that is already in the first book, but I think it must go a bit deeper
detail,
then.
About Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone, yeah.
And when I first joined the PF, we were still on the black economy, as it's known, which meant we weren't formally established. So we were in existence, but on paper we weren't. So all the guys that made up that unit were borrowed off the strengths of other units, and all the weapons, all the vehicles, all the equipment was borrowed from other units.
Yes.
You wouldn't get away with it nowadays, but back then it kind of worked.
Yes.
And it wasn't until 1997 that we got formally established, and I was in a platoon when that happened, actually.
Interesting. When we chatted a bit earlier, you sort of went in and out of Pathfinders. How did that work?
Okay, so I did 4 years from 95 until end of 99. Then I went to the Red Devils for 3 years. Okay. And basically just enjoyed my life for 3 years, going skydiving and stuff all around the world, and jumping into events and stuff like that. I then came back to the Pathfinders specifically because we knew Iraq was coming up.
Right.
So there was going to be a proper, wartime deployment, and I thought there's no way I'm going to miss out on this. So I came back to the Pathfinders specifically because of that. I then did another 5 years in a platoon where we went to Afghanistan 2006, which we've been talking around, and then lots of other courses and deployments and things like that, exercises all around the world. I then went to a thing called JAD2, Joint Aerial Delivery Trials and Evaluation Unit, which is where it's got different sections within it, but one of them is the Airborne Trials Section. And I was there for 2.5 years doing trials and development of military parachute systems. So I finished that job for 2.5 years and then came back to the Pathfinders as a platoon sergeant for the sort of latter part of my career. And then I went back to Afghanistan in 2010 during that period.
Fantastic. You also mentioned when we had a chat in the preparation for this, you served some time in patrols platoon as well. What is sort of the difference in the roles of patrols versus Pathfinders?
Yeah, so I was in one para patrols from... It actually got re-established in January 1994. So I was there for the best part of 2 years before I then went to Pathfinders. And there is a fair bit of crossover in the roles, actually. But the main difference, really, is patrols platoon they serve the battalion.
Yes.
So they're the reconnaissance unit for one para. Whereas Pathfinders they can be tasked, well, they are for the brigades, 16 brigade as it is now, but they can be tasked by other parts of the military, so they're more on par with like an SF type tasking.
So
they're much longer range, and they've got more capabilities, things like your HAHO and HAHO, things like that. Whereas the patrols are just relatively short range recce, so they'd be maybe 20 to 30 kilometres in front of a unit, whereas the Pathfinders could be in another continent, or well in advance of any unit, and they could be operating at what's called at reach with very little or no support whatsoever.
Now, if you look at standard infantry units like the rifles, I guess the guards, they will have recce capability. Is patrols then more akin to recce?
It's exactly the same. Just, I think it's a historical thing from the parachute regiment. They call their recce platoons patrols platoons, whereas in other regiments they'll call them a recce platoon. It's the same sort of thing, but obviously it then the unit that they operate to and with will reflect on how they operate. So in a parachute regiment, patrols platoon, they tend to work a little bit more, again, at reach, maybe at further distance with less support, whereas maybe a mechanised recce unit would be fairly close with vehicles and things like that. But very similar roles as well.
And there's sort of selection to serve in recce, I would imagine.
So we did the patrols cadre in January in Sennybridge in 1994, and that was basically the Pathfinder cadre without the hills phase. Exactly the same as the Pathfinder cadre, and it was incredibly tough. And we basically was working in very, very tough conditions in January in Sennybridge for a month, and the cadre was actually run by the Pathfinders. So we had very close ties with the Pathfinders at the time, and a lot of us actually ended up coming across to the Pathfinders later on. And we also, at the end of that 4 weeks, did what's now known as SEER as well. So the full SEER level C course, which is escape and evasion and survival, and then resistance to interrogation at the end. So we did a full session of that as well, the actual Pathfinder one as well.
Amazing. And to tie that back, you're hosting a SEER course in August.
We are,
right?
yeah, we're doing an escape and evasion
So
course.
for anyone watching who wants to get a bit of a taste of that,
Yeah.
very useful skills. Is it 40 hours then, or how long is it?
So that one there, the one I'll be running, will be 2.5 days, basically.
Oh, okay.
So Friday evening over to Sunday.
What does Pathfinder Cadre select for over and above P Company?
Yeah, so there are similar parts to it, but P Company is literally a fitness event. It's just fitness. I mean, obviously you've got the Trainasium, which is an aerial confidence course, but it is all just fitness based. Whereas the Pathfinder course, there's a lot of fitness on it, but it's not just fitness.
Yeah.
So during the Cadre, we'll deploy into Sandy Bridge training area, and you're tested on your soldiering skills at very high level as well. So everything you're going to be doing is going to be on hard routine, something you're familiar with. So that is no cooking, no talking. It's all hand signals, unless you absolutely have to say anything. Always operating with at least, well, most of your weapons operational at one point, so only one weapon being cleaned at any time, only one person changing the socks at any time, pissing in bottles, shitting in bags, all that sort of nice stuff. And the idea of hard routine is that you're creating less of a signature that the enemy can detect you when you're operating in close proximity to the enemy. So on exercise in Brecon in November, freezing cold, not being able to make a cup of tea is not nice, but it's very high level soldiering skills, and you're being tested constantly.
Yes.
So there's always going to be a DS there watching you. So if you try and take a shortcut, or if you make a mistake, they're going to spot you straight away. So it's not just a fitness test, it's also high-level soldiering testing as well.
Yeah. It's nice you mentioned that hard routine. That's actually a little anecdote, because why the channel is called Hard Routine is certainly not because I'm a specialist in it. I like reading all sorts of military history books. I was reading Phil Campion's book called Who Dares Wins, or something like that. He's written a few books. They're all great. I can recommend them. And he describes, at some point, I think he'd been at a low point in life, so to speak.
Yeah.
And he was living in a camper van. And he actually mentions in the book, which he borrowed from his mate, Tom Blakey. He mentions you by name, long before we ever met. And he goes, he was basically, I guess he was so skinny, he said, I was living hard routine.
Yeah, yeah.
And my channel at the time was called Smooth as Fast or Slow as Fast, whatever, for the first few weeks. I read that, I thought that is such a cool term.
Yeah.
And so it's come full circle with you now explaining what hard routine actually is. I'm just a fanboy like most of the audience. But no, that's great. So it's operating in a high threat level, non-permissive environment where you need to live hard routine.
So if you're working in advance of your own troops, in close proximity to the enemy, you want to do everything you can to not be detected, so being less likely to be detected. So like I say, no talking unless you absolutely have to, just hand signals, eating cold rations, not cooking anything, not creating any smell or noise, and being ready to go at all times.
Yeah. And Big Phil was borrowing your camper van for that.
That's right. I lent him a camper van just so he could get himself back on his feet after he'd had a bit of a hard time, basically. Fantastic
channel as well. I think it's called Big Phil Unfiltered. Yeah. So zooming back in on the Pathfinders, having read that book, Ex-Platoon, Heaney generation lived on, a lot of HAHO, HAHO. What was that a primary insertion method in your time, and how did the kit evolve over all the years that you were in?
It's quite an interesting question, actually, because when I first joined the Pathfinders, we was using a parachute called the GQ360, which was 1970s technology.
Right.
It was an old parachute, and there's two versions. There was a static line version for HAHO, and there was a freefall version for HALO. The static line version didn't give us a particularly good glide ratio, so you couldn't cover massive distance on it. You could cover some miles, but not brilliant. And also, the freefall variant, the way it worked is you pulled a handle to operate it. It had a kicker spring that come off your back with a pilot chute around it. But what would happen is it wasn't a particularly good spring. It used to bounce around and just sit on the burble.
Right.
When you're falling, there's a thing called a burble above you, so dead air as you're falling. And it's to sit in a burble and just bounce around and not pull the parachute. So the actions was you pull the parachute and then literally whack the parachute with your elbows to make it come off your back.
Wow.
That's not particularly good, to the point where on my freefall course, a bloke died.
Oh, wow.
So he had one of these, they call it an extractor hesitation.
Yeah.
It was an RAF guy that was training to be a freefall instructor, and he went all the way into the ground with no parachute.
Wow.
And I was on the aircraft when it happened, and it's quite a scary thing because they had intercom in the back of the aircraft on loudspeaker. and they asked the DZ safety officer, how many parachutes can you see? And it didn't tally with the amount of guys that exited the aircraft.
Yeah.
And some of my friends were on that same stick.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God.
One of them, yeah.
You know? So the technology was not particularly good. And I was actually in the Pathfinders when we trialled new systems, new parachutes that were going to take over from this old parachute. And we got a thing called the French, there was a French parachute called the BT-80, and that had two variants as well, the freefall and the static line version.
Right.
And it was a far better parachute, and it's still in use now. And I've done HAHO jumps with that, and we've got 50 kilometres out of it. So
wow.
We're not talking 15 to 18 anymore, we're talking 30 miles glide.
Wow, that's so cool.
Parachute. It gives you a much better glide ratio. Yeah. So the HAHO, basically, when you exit the plane, it's on a static line.
Yeah.
Opens parachute straight away. And the idea is you basically just glide towards your target, and the plane doesn't have to fly anywhere near the enemy. You basically can cross a border on your parachute.
Yeah.
Still penetrate another 30 miles into that country or so. You know, it depends on the wind conditions. But yeah, doing the HAHO stuff's amazing. Obviously, you're wearing oxygen because you're jumping at 25,000 feet. And you've got all your equipment on, weapons and all that stuff.
All in your chest? Or
Yeah, the front, yeah. And again, with the free fall, you jump with all that gear, big massive rucksack on the front and equipment and stuff. So that's two parts of the parachute insertion. We also had static line round canopies, which is the normal parachute that normal paratroopers use. And there's also the military tandem system where you tandem someone else in, and then all the equipment for two people on the front of the person, plus two weapons, plus two oxygen systems. And you do all that again at night from anything up to 25,000 feet.
And that's, for instance, if somebody is not necessarily parachute trained, like in a support role, whether it be a medic or a signals, you know better than me, or and have you actually, well, you certainly trained with it, or have you done?
Yeah, I've done about 1,500 tandems.
Oh, wow. There you go.
There's a really good example of that capability was the Tristan da Cunha operation that was conducted about a month ago, where they jumped into that island in the middle of nowhere with a doctor and a medic because someone had just landed on the island with quite a bad virus, and they had to get help out there to stop it from spreading and the rest of it, take care of that person. And there's no fixed wing aircraft runway, and helicopters don't have the range to get there. So the only way they could do it effectively was by parachuting in. It was the Pathfinders that did it.
Incredible,
It's pretty amazing.
Can I say, the person that is being told you're going to get strapped to a Pathfinder and do a
military freefall tandem.
Oh, wow.
And those two people, one of them had done a civilian tandem, the other person never jumped out of a plane in their life. So you can imagine
kudos.
how scary that must have been. Because imagine that's the tailgate, you walk to the edge of the tailgate and your feet are on the edge, and then you're told to hang in a harness as a passenger, and you've got your life in the guy's hands behind you, and next thing you know, you're out the plane, you know. So that must have been pretty scary for the passengers, but amazing job done.
In terms of cross-training with other countries, what's been your experience with that, and how did you feel certain countries rated and stuff like that?
We've done quite a bit of training with other countries. I went to Holland and did the Dutch military freefall with the Dutch...
The Army Commandos. Cross Commander Trooper,
Yeah. So we went across to them, that was in 1996. So what happened was, after the fatality on my freefall course, they grounded the parachute, they stopped it from being used, pending an inquiry, and in the meantime they sent us on a Dutch freefall course, and we went jumping with the Dutch guys. That was great. I've got to say, they weren't really on level with us, I've got to say that. They were really good guys, really nice fellas, but they weren't on par with us, I don't think, in terms of soldiering and stuff like that. But they were really good guys. I've trained with the Americans quite a bit, and again, really good guys, professional and stuff, but their skill level isn't anywhere near what I've seen anyway. British Army, especially Pathfinders or Parachute Regiment, fitness levels and skill levels that aren't quite on par at all. But really good guys, and obviously they've got the scale. They've got much more capability than British will ever have, because they've got scale of numbers and funding and stuff like that. So what they lack in individual skills and stuff, they can make up for with numbers and the scale of what they can deploy.
Now, let's move to the summer of 2006, which is the meat on the bone of today's visit. And we were chatting about doing it because I've done a number of events. You've kindly appeared on the channel before. We was chatting on the phone and said, I'd love to do a bigger interview. That's actually the 20-year anniversary of Musa Qala coming up. So a little bit of scene setting. By early 2006, the Taliban were establishing themselves in the Helmand Kandahar heartland through violence. Britain joined a roughly 9,000 strong multinational force. Canadians, Dutch, Danish, with Britain being assigned to Helmand. And take it back to the start. How did you find out that you were going to be part of that deployment?
So we all knew we was going.
Right.
We didn't have an exact date or anything set, but we knew it was coming up. It had been announced, and we actually did a build-up training package. So it wasn't one of those ones that all of a sudden you go in. It wasn't
Right.
like a quick reaction like, say, Sierra Leone was. And so we knew we was going. We did a training package in Salisbury Plain. It was absolutely freezing cold, and we was training for like the summer of Afghanistan. So,
Yeah.
you know, quite ironic really. But yeah, we did all that training package, and we was told, I think it was the defence minister or someone like that said, oh, I'll be surprised if they even fire one shot in anger.
Yeah.
And all of us knew that was absolute crap, because we were going into the heart of the Taliban stronghold.
Wow, yeah.
And we knew it was going to be rough. And we didn't exactly know how it was going to pan out, but we had a good idea that it was going to be what's known as a kinetic tour.
Yeah.
And it was.
Yeah. How was the mission explained to you in terms of...
We was told we was going to go there because we needed to stabilise that region of Afghanistan, because it had been established as a training camp or training area for the Taliban.
Yeah.
You know, that had done that was behind the 9/11 attacks.
Yes. Yeah.
Someone had to go in there to basically take the fight to the enemy before they got stronger and stronger and took it to us.
Yeah. Now, the last major combat operations had been the Falklands, 82.
Yeah.
So that would be 24 years earlier. There was bits in between. Was there a sense of limited combat experience, or like what was the state of the regiment and perhaps pockets within that regiment in terms of operational experience?
I'd say that, I mean, we'd been to Northern Ireland loads, so Northern Ireland was a different beast, but it was, you know, operations. And people were killed out there, and the threat of being shot at or blown up every day was there. So at least we had that experience. Everyone pretty much at that time was, you know, a Northern Ireland experience.
Yes.
And we've been to places like Kosovo and things. There was some smaller operational deployments, but yeah, nothing war fighting wise.
Yeah.
And I do think, we didn't have any real proper combat experience within the British Army as a whole, really, as the Falklands was a one-off, and that was, as you say, 24 years before. So we didn't have an awful lot of combat experience, but the thing is with the British Army, you always do train hard.
Yeah.
So even though you don't have that combat experience, you are, you know, you're drilled hard, you're trained hard, so you're ready for these deployments, and training's a very important thing.
Yes. And of course, as you said, you mentioned Kosovo and Estonia. You personally were in Pathfinders for those of some of those ops, weren't you?
Yeah, so I was in Pathfinders in Kosovo in 99, and then I went to the Red Devils in 2000. Macedonia was 2001, but I actually volunteered to come back to the Pathfinders just for that operation. And in both of those tours, I was actually in the same patrol as Bryan Budd.
Oh, right.
Who was killed in Afghanistan in the 2006 tour.
Yeah.
And we was in the same team together. So really good guy, and it was a real sad incident when he was killed out there, actually.
So we're going to talk about Herrick IV, and to your point, Bryan Budd was sadly killed during that deployment. We will get to that as we go through the timeline.
Cool.
So the Helmand task force as a whole, from your point of view in Pathfinders, did you have a good understanding of who was going to be deployed? Did you feel you were sufficiently resourced, or was there question marks?
As a relatively junior soldier, you're not really that well informed. You kind of got an idea of the bigger picture, but you're not really understanding of the scale and what the tasks are for the whole battle group as such.
Yeah.
But it came pretty clear pretty quickly that we were massively undermanned for the tasks that we needed to do. We had one battle group, one battalion, for an enormous region that needed really a brigade.
Yeah.
And we had kind of the vast majority of the brigade did deploy, but it was only one battalion. So we had support elements for all of, say, artillery, medics, engineers and stuff. But we only have one battalion of, fighting troops. And really, it should have been a brigade. For the area that we was employed in, it wasn't enough guys.
Right.
And also the resources as well, so vehicles and helicopters in particular. From what I remember, I think we had 6 Chinooks for the entire region, and there was always one that was needed to be fixed.
Of course,
So yeah. 5.
Especially in the desert. There's a guy called Gerald Templar who coined the phrase hearts and minds, which is a well-known military phrase, but it was phrased by the Brits in Malaya and the Malayan emergency in 52.
Yep.
In terms of your workup training, was that also sort of hearts and minds focused? Was it war fighting? Was it a bit of both? Or?
It was a bit of both. To be honest, the training that we were given from the sort of larger army was massively inadequate. It was not suitable or adequate at all for what we was going to be doing.
Right.
And they was focusing on, they kept coining this phrase, think Northern Ireland in the desert, which ended up being a complete load of crap. But the training we did internally within the brigade and within the Pathfinders specifically, we did much more realistic training that was more suitable for what we were doing, which was going to be war fighting.
Yeah. Awesome. Do you recall what you personally expected? That you thought was going to happen? Or?
Yeah, I thought we was going to go over there and it was going to kick off, and that's exactly.
Yeah.
I was 100% expecting it to be a tough tour, and it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you thought this probably going to be the biggest deployment of your life to that point then?
Yeah.
In terms of the intelligence picture, like intelligence gathering is a big part of Pathfinder work, of course.
Yeah.
Looking back, was the actual intel picture you found on the ground, was it close to what you'd been briefed, or was it yet very incomplete?
It was quite incomplete, actually. Right. So the information we was given was very sketchy, and there wasn't a lot out there that was realistic, true to what was going on. And our job was actually to get what they call ground truth.
Right.
So to go out, speak to people through interpreters, find out what their attitudes and what their requirements were, what could we do to help the people, to heart and minds, to bring them on side. That sort of thing was a big part of what we were doing out there, actually, as Pathfinders specifically.
Yeah. You mentioned your Northern Ireland experience and even the term Northern Ireland in the desert. Whilst that may be an inadequate term, did your Northern Ireland experience, which involved operating among civilians, reading a crowd, spotting if you're being dicked, things like that. Did that transfer at all from Ulster to Afghanistan?
It did. So obviously it was very different. It was a very different situation because you're in a completely alien part of the world. As Northern Ireland was weird because you was working in the UK and it was part of your homeland. And it was weird being on patrol, feeling as though you could get blown up any day by people that looked like you, that's, had a slightly different accent, but they were British,
Yeah.
They don't want to be called British, but they were. Whereas going to Afghanistan, it was like being on the moon.
Wow.
It was like being in a completely and utterly alien atmosphere. And to be honest, some of the areas we went to, you could feel the hatred.
Wow.
You could they were looking at you with absolute hate in their eyes. Just because they looked on you as an invader or whatever, I guess. And these are just, your average people. We're not talking about people that you're fighting as such. Not everyone, but there was a lot of hostility out there. But going back to your question about Northern Ireland, I do think a lot of our experience did translate well, where you, like say, reading a crowd, keeping your eye out for people that are dicking you, maybe, maybe looking at ambushing you or attacking you or something. And it definitely did help you as a soldier having that experience, There's various books
that also talk about how the Americans took a lot from the Brits in Afghanistan when they noticed the advancement in terms of intelligence gathering and how to work with informants, and that's definitely well documented. The Brits were seen to have an advantage because of Northern Ireland.
I think we do that a little bit better than the Americans. They tend to be very kind of shut us up behind armour, guns everywhere and that sort of thing. And I think the British do tend to be a little bit better at working with local populations and stuff and being a little bit more understanding. And like whenever you'd be talking to a local, you'd gather people together for a shura, like the local elders and stuff. You'd always take your helmet off. You'd never wear your sunglasses. You'd take your gloves off, all those sorts of things, and try and conform to a degree to their like practices and how they do things. Whereas the Americans were very like, guns everywhere and stuff and behind armour and all this.
We're going to go into theatre with the next question. So when you actually arrived, what did you find?
So I had a bit of an unusual arrival because I was on Senior Brecon, which is the course that you do for your platoon sergeant's qualifications.
Right.
Platoon sergeant's battle.
So you're a corporal at this point?
A corporal, So I was in Brecon, platoon sergeant's battle course, and I finished the first phase on a Friday, and I found out that day that I was going to Afghanistan on the Monday. So I had a weekend to sort my kit out, which isn't a lot of time. Most of the platoon had already deployed over there. I went on my own, as in I was on an aircraft with other soldiers, but there was no other from my unit.
Right,
And I was told when I got over there, there'll be someone there to meet you at Camp Bastion. I got there and there was nobody to meet me.
Oh, really?
So I'm on my own in the middle of this massive, massive camp going, where am I going? No advice from anyone. I'd asked people and they didn't know. So I made my way to the 3-para ops tent, their sort of HQ tent. And when I got there, there was a whole flurry of stuff going on because things had just kicked off in Sangin. I think it was the first contact in Sangin.
Yeah.
And things were kicking off there. And so they weren't interested in looking after someone that didn't know where they were meant to be going. Because I didn't even know where I was going to. I had no idea where the Pathfinders were. I thought there would be some of us in Bastion, but there wasn't. Anyway, luckily I found someone that I knew that was working in 3-para HQ, Stuart Russell, who was my boss in the Pathfinder, in the Red Devils.
Yeah.
So he was in this tent and he said, right, we're really busy in a minute. He goes, get yourself in that tent over there. There's a space there to get your head down. I'll see you in the morning and we'll sort you out. So in the morning, I went back in there. Things had settled a little bit. And I got myself booked onto a helicopter. I think it was a Chinook, if I remember right. And that flew me out to where the Pathfinder's FOB was, which was FOB Price.
Okay.
And there was actually a Danish camp.
Right.
But there was a small amount of British troops there, Pathfinders being one of those groups. So I got there, and there was only like 3 guys from the unit there because the rest of the guys were actually in Musa Qala.
Oh, right.
They'd just gone out and they'd just gone to Musa Qala.
Right.
They'd only been there for like a day or something.
And can I ask, was that the whole Pathfinders, or was it like a little advance?
No, we didn't have the whole platoon over there at the time. There was about 2/3 of us.
Okay.
Some of the guys had been left back in the UK on courses.
How many people are we talking there?
It was 20 odd.
Okay.
I think about 20, 21 guys, and they were in Musa Qala. So I was flown out the next day to Musa Qala.
Right.
And it was an absolute shock because when I jumped off the back of the Chinook, there was a couple of like Toyotas, as technicals as they're known, with like 50 cows on the back and stuff, and Dushkas, and a bunch of bearded, scruffy Afghan guys with AKs. And I thought, have I just walked into an ambush here?
Yeah.
And they were like 10 metres away. There was like 20 of these guys all hanging off vehicles with these big scruffy beards covered in crap and all this, dirty and mucky. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And I turned and the OC Pathfinder was there. With these guys.
Oh, really?
But he looked like a Taliban because he had this massive big bushy beard and he was scruffy and gungy as well. But he was carrying, an SA-80 as opposed to an AK.
Yeah.
And I was like, God for that, because I thought I just walked into... I thought I was just about to get hung up.
Yeah.
And so that was my introduction to Musa Qala. And we was in a wadi just outside of the town centre. So I jumped on the back of one of these vehicles and there was a couple of Wimics there as well, Land Rovers. And we drove into the town centre, and this is where I was saying, where as we was driving past, there was civilians, just local people in the side streets and stuff, and they just looked at us with absolute hatred, absolute hate in their eyes.
Right.
And you could just feel that animosity, The other guys that were in these pickup trucks, by the way, were Afghan police. And they looked exactly the same as the Taliban.
The ANP, I guess.
Yeah.
And were you guys supposed to mentor them, or
we were there reinforcing them? Musa Qala had the day before had nearly been overrun by the Taliban.
Oh wow!
And there'd been guys killed. There was like, when I got to this compound, this mud-walled compound, there was RPG holes in the walls. There was like big black scorch marks where they'd been hit with RPGs and bullets and stuff. And the AMP had nearly been kicked out of that compound and annihilated, but they just about hung on, and then PF were the only unit left in the brigade left to actually do anything.
Reinforce it.
Because all the other companies were fixed in other locations, defending other towns. So we was the last sort of manoeuvre element that was able to be used. So we got sent in there with I think there was 21 of us, and then we got stuck in there for a couple of months. You
touched on something there, and it's worth digging into. So there was this strategy then with like platoon houses or bases scattered around the province, each of which had its own unit defending it then.
It did. So there mainly just a company of each, company from 3-para in each of those places,
I got it.
And they were fixed pretty early because of what was going on. They couldn't actually then manoeuvre out. They were just fixed into defending locations.
And the Pathfinders had arrived in vehicles? Was it Wimics or Pinzgaus or what was
Wimics.
Okay.
Yeah, we had basically 3 people per Wimic, so 2 Wimics per patrol. So it must have been about 8 Wimics or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of that kit, the 50 cows, GPMGs, what was good and bad about that setup?
Pathfinders aren't designed as a defensive infantry company.
No.
So we didn't have the same sort of kit as a company would have. But the fact is, the Wimics, you know, you've got 50 cal and a GPMG on most of the vehicles, or 2 GPMGs. So that gives you a lot of, you know, firepower. So we was able to relocate a lot of those weapons on the rooftops of the buildings, which gave us a lot of firepower. But then we didn't have any other. All we had for mortars was the 51mm, 51mm mortars, which I think were 3 of those.
Okay.
So we didn't have any 81 mortars or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to your point, yeah, you're not, holding a defensive position is very much not your core.
It's not a Pathfinder role, but the thing is, you know, needs must and all that, and that's what we ended up having to do.
In terms of moving through terrain and reading the terrain, because presumably you weren't just static at that base, you were doing reconnaissance. Well, what sort of thing are you then looking for to identify possible ambush positions and things like that?
We didn't want to just stay within the location, even though that was what we was defending, because if you do that, it gives the enemy freedom of movement everywhere around you, which means they can plant IEDs or they can sneak up on the compound and put attacks in and stuff. So the idea of patrolling is to not deny the enemy freedom of movement. So we would send out patrols, you know, once or twice a day, and then we'd do a nighttime patrol as well. But the fact is, I think we only had 21 guys, around about 21 guys. So really, you need everyone on the ground to be able to put in a decent amount of troops on the ground, really. So what we were doing was we were putting out the majority of that number with just a few guys left on the base itself, with the AMP providing most of the firepower. And, you know, without saying anything too bad about the AMP, they weren't like working with British soldiers.
Right.
You couldn't really rely on them. They would like go asleep on stag and stuff like this, apparently, sometimes. So yeah, it was quite a precarious situation that we had a very few numbers, far less than what we should have really had. But again, you've just got to deal with it. You've got to make the best of what you've got. Doing
recce's with your Wimic through the desert, did that remind you of the long-range desert group traditions, in terms of SOP and tactics? So I guess the question is, were you aware of that lineage? And secondly, did some of those SOPs get handed down over the generations, and were you still using them?
Yeah. So during that first part of my tour of Afghanistan, we weren't really doing that because I got dropped in by a helicopter and we were stuck in this place and just putting patrols out and defending. But later on in that tour, then yes, we were out in the desert a lot. I've always been a big fan of the LRDG. They were an absolutely amazing unit. And it was very, very similar to what we were doing later on in the tour, to be honest. Long range patrols in vehicles, tooled up with loads of weapons. And I was using vehicles, and we actually did quite often say about this sort of thing that you're talking about is very much like the Second World War LRDG. And I'd read about the LRDG loads when I was a kid. Even made the little vehicles, model vehicles.
Oh, cool.
But I've always been a big fan of the LRDG. I thought they were an absolutely amazing unit. And it was very, very similar to what we were doing later on in the tour, to be honest. Long range patrols in vehicles, tooled up with loads of weapons. And as you say, information gathering and stuff like that.
And for those less familiar, there's some great books about this, the Long Range Desert Group, part of the formation of the SCS, Special Force Capability. And they are some of the guys from LRDG, were some of the key founders, really, the early originals who started that lineage, British Special Forces. In terms of Soviet-era minefields, and we'll get to sort of Kajaki a bit later, but were you aware that there were still Soviet mines out there? How did that inform how you moved around the terrain in sort of awareness?
Yeah, it's quite a scary thing, actually, because the Russians just left a load of their mines out there. They didn't bring them back in. I think they basically, when they had to go, when they left Afghanistan, they were just like, sod the local people that can have the mines, and they'd just leave them there. And a lot of those mines, even if you'd mapped where they were, which a lot of them weren't, they'd shifted through time. You know, the sands had shifted and rains and stuff. And I was very aware of it because not long before I got there, one of our vehicles went over a mine, and I think all three guys were, well, I know at least 2 of them were badly injured. I think one of them lost both his legs. And this happened to be an engineer vehicle that was attached to the Pathfinders that went over the mine. So it was a Pathfinder, patrol vehicle, but it was the engineers that was in that vehicle. So I was very acutely aware of the threat.
Wow.
So the way we operated is we worked in a single file, because obviously then you've got only one vehicle really should be at threat at any one time. Doesn't always work out like that, but you're trying to cut down the opportunity for mines to give you a bad day. So if you're the lead vehicle, you're at threat massively, and the vehicle commander and all three of you in the vehicle are constantly scanning the ground in front of you all the time, near and far and medium distance, for any potential disturbed earth, anything that looks out of place, that sort of thing, all the time. And it's a big threat, and it does take a lot out of you, actually.
Yeah.
And I know this because I was the commander of the lead vehicle for quite a while after Musa Qala. So, yeah, it's quite a nervous feeling when you're at the front all the time.
Yeah, and there was no intel about where these fields might be then.
Well, that's it. The Russians, like I say, just said, sod you, like, you can have our mines.
Yeah.
And, people, no doubt, are still stepping on them nowadays, sadly.
We take it to mid-June. The first British combat death in Helmand was Jim Phillipson, who was sadly lost, part of a patrol that was attacked. Were you already in country when that news struck the airborne community?
I think that was just before
11th of June, I think. Okay.
That was just before I got there, but I did hear about it, and it was quite a sad incident from what I heard. Without pinning the blame, it sounds like there was some mistakes made on that on that patrol. And from what I understand, he was shot through the side of his body armour.
Right.
And he didn't even know he'd been shot at the time. From what I heard, somebody said that he felt out of breath or something, and then next thing you know, he's on the ground, bleeding out. Yeah, poor guy.
Could you maybe explain that platoon house concept? There was Sangin, Musa Qala, there were others. Why were you aware why troops were fixed in that way?
Okay, yeah. So generally, the locations were held because they were in strategic positions.
Okay.
So they're on crossroads of, main routes going through areas where the Taliban wanted to move to then go and do their attacks or whatever, or to regroup or train. And we had to hold those locations, otherwise they then have freedom of movement to do whatever they wanted to do. And obviously, part of the other thing is if you're there holding a house and they're attacking you, you're kind of bringing a fight to them as well in a way, even though they're attacking you. It's like, okay, we're here, come and have a go sort of thing. And we gave them a bloody nose every time they had a go.
Right,
so that was good.
In terms of, was there sort of radio chatter between the compounds or platoon house, whatever you want to call it? It was big, between the period of the 21st and the 30th of June in Sangin. There's a real period when I guess you would probably already been at Musa Qala. Would you guys be aware if it was kicking off anywhere else, or were you very much living in your own bubble?
You do kind of live in your own bubble because you're concerned with what's going on in your area and what's happening there. But you wouldn't be talking to other locations. But what you used to get is an INT update every evening.
Right.
So every evening we'd have a briefing, and everyone was brought in together that wasn't on a stag position, and you'd be given an update on what's going on in the region.
Right.
It would be everything from what's happening in this platoon house or that location, and bigger picture stuff as well. So maybe if more troops are being flown into the region to support the effort, anything like that really. So there'd be an update every evening. So you would get to hear about incidents of things like maybe if there'd been a fatality or something else, people being killed or whatever, or a big attack being put into a compound. Yeah,
because as we'll see in a minute, it sounds like there was some coordination. Some of these dates are very close together, where one is attacked and then the next day another by sort of hundreds each, where the Taliban clearly were coordinating these attacks centrally, I think. In terms of defending the compound then, and I appreciate when you arrived, some of this had already been set up. Like, how do you guys read a compound for defensibility? How do you cover angles and set it up?
So Musa Qala was quite a difficult place to defend because it was a compound in and amongst the town, and a lot of the areas weren't open around us.
Right.
It was basically built up areas right.
So there were people living there, civilians going about their business.
But there was basically covered approaches to the compound.
Right. Oh, I see.
So the enemy could get right up on top of us, and we wouldn't know they were coming because they were moving through buildings and around buildings and stuff. So that's why you put patrols out to try and disrupt any of their operations. But you can't be out 24 hours a day, especially if you've only got 21 guys. But so the commanders that were there when we first turned up, they've obviously made their appreciation, and they've decided where they're going to put defensive points, sentry positions, machine guns, things like that to cover approaches. But again, you can only do what you can do with what you've got with the situation you're in. So it wasn't a brilliant position to be in, and we didn't have any defensive stores anyway.
Right.
Because we were in Wimix with just carrying our normal patrol kit. So we weren't carrying masses of like barbed wire and sandbags. We didn't have any sandbags at all.
Did you have snipers as part of your capability?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we had snipers, and they are useful, but again, fairly limited because of the situation we were in.
Right.
But they were useful and they were used. But yeah, we didn't have any defence stores whatsoever. But that was improved when the engineers came in to reinforce us. So that was good.
Yeah. Then on July 1st in Sangin, Corporal Peter Thorpe, Lance Corporal Jabron Hashmi and Interpreter Daoud were killed when a rocket struck their tower. They were part of the airborne community, as in attached to 3 para from 14 signals. I guess that was one of the earlier larger losses. Were you aware of that, and how did that affect the airborne communities?
So basically, you hear about incidents that have happened and people that have been killed and stuff. And yeah, it's a bit of a shock to hear 3 people getting killed in a one. But it's one of those things that, yeah, you've heard about it, you know, it makes the situation seem a bit more real, but you just keep, there's no like, you don't go down in the dumps and, I can't do this.
No.
You just crack on with your job.
Their unit was doing an early warning surveillance task to be in a sort of an outpost tower, warning of Taliban movements, impending attacks, the task that you in the PF are very familiar with. How does that forward intelligence gathering help a besieged position? And then question B, with that tower taken out, how does that then degrade whoever they were supposed to be?
I mean, I can't really say about that particular location because I wasn't there. But yeah, that's the sort of thing. We were listening into ICOM chat, so radio chat, because the Taliban were using non-coded radios. So we had someone with an interpreter like scanning the channels and then listening to what they were saying. And there was some quite interesting stuff we picked up on. In fact, one quite interesting one, and I'm sure people out there might decide, no, that was our unit that this happened to, but apparently it was from the Pathfinders that the term alienus saves lives comes from.
All right.
Because we were approaching a wadi, getting ready to move across a wadi, and then what we used to do was spread our vehicles out across a wadi, observe for a certain amount of time, just to see if there's anything happening, you know, any dangers, potential dangers and stuff. And over the ICOM radios, one of the interpreters said, they've just said, they're the guys with the beards, don't attack them, because they've got, they thought we were like tougher, more experienced, because we were allowed to grow beards in the Pathfinders for the operation, whereas the rest of the battle group, only when they were deployed there was beards grow a little bit, whereas we grew them before we went. And the idea was, going back to Hearts and Minds, is they identify you more as a warrior and as a man if you've got a beard. So we grew our beards so we was more accepted by them, and then it got to the point where they saw us as more these like experienced troops. So that's where the phrase alienus saves lives comes from.
Fantastic. Yeah. That's a great bit of history. Just briefly back to those 3 guys on their early warning and surveillance task, and the fact they had an interpreter with them. I guess that's exactly what they were doing. This is radio chat, and the fact that they were signals. So they actually couldn't be CASEVAC until dawn, which unfortunately obviously didn't help in terms of survivability. For the Pathfinders operating independently and even further forward, CASEVAC is vital. So how do you plan for the reality that CASEVAC could be a day away?
Again, you just got to deal with what you've got, you know. And we did have quite a bad incident where the Danish actually reinforced us, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. And one of their guys was shot in the head, and the RAF weren't able to send an aircraft to come recover him, and he was still alive.
Wow.
He'd lost the back of his skull, and he was still alive. It was our medic that kept him alive. And it was actually an American helicopter to come and pick him up.
Right.
And I think I don't know what, I can't remember what the actual big picture was with aircraft availability and stuff, whether there just wasn't one available. But what I heard was the RAF didn't want to send an aircraft because they were too worried about getting shot down.
Right.
And that doesn't fill you with confidence. Because if you're being put in danger, you know, potential life-threatening danger, if they're not even going to come and get you when you've been hurt, it doesn't give you much confidence. And the Americans actually sent a Black Hawk and they picked him up. But it was quite funny. Well, I say funny, it was a bit of a funny situation because the helicopter came overhead and we wanted to land in the compound and there wasn't a lot of space. And the pilot obviously thought, no, I'm not going to make that. And then just carried on going and landed in a clearing outside the compound. And we didn't have any troops out in that area.
Right.
So they put themselves in massive danger. So if the Taliban had been anywhere close by, they could have taken that helicopter out easy.
Right.
Luckily, there was no one sitting there waiting to ambush that.
And it was because you mentioned this. Well, we have an extensive prep chat, And it is a matter of public record, actually, this, because the Danish have gone back and written their own books and what have you.
Yeah.
So I haven't been able to verify that when the RAF said we can't do it, a very senior Danish guy back at HQ called the Americans.
Right.
And what they did apparently is, yes, they sent the Black Hawk and the 2 Apaches in cover. So I do believe they had 2 Apaches circling as well, which sort of hopefully alleviates the threat a bit. But well, our American brothers, they've just had their 250th anniversary a couple of days ago. So it's, for any Americans watching, I guess, they've proven themselves.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your support. I mean, a lot of people like to slate the Yanks, but do you know what? They've saved our asses a lot of times.
Yeah.
And when we were there in Musa Qala, we were getting airstrikes from American aircraft like A-10s and stuff. And they did really help, you know, the defence of that compound so much.
And again, at Kajaki, they may well have saved lives, because there was a medic that ran, it's in the film, ran straight through a minefield.
I met that guy.
Oh, have you really?
Yeah, I have.
Wow.
Yeah, I was at the premiere of that film and I actually met the guy afterwards. And he didn't even know they was in a minefield.
Wow.
They hadn't been told.
Really?
Yeah. He ran across and I said to him, well, that was an incredibly brave thing you did. And he went, well, I didn't know it was a minefield.
Wow.
So he was just ignorant to the fact.
Which at that point had already taken, what, 3 casualties, up 3 or 4?
At least 3 or 4,
yeah. Incredible. So shout out to the Yanks, as you say.
Absolutely.
So just to take it back to the timeline, the Brits are spread across 5 forward locations, undermanned and overextended. You ended up in Musa Qala. Now, you are actually personally mentioned, there's a great book by Patrick Bishop called 3 Para. I'll just put the little image of it there. And you're mentioned in one of the chapters as setting up a makeshift cafe that is referred to as a Morale Central. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so basically when we were in the compound, you know, you've got everyday life. You're not just fighting all the time. Obviously, there were a lot of attacks, but you know, you've got to basically just put up with life living in a shithole.
Yeah.
What I did is we found an old, like a drum that had cable on it. So when it was turned on its side, it had a circular top, probably sat about this high. We had a couple of like chairs that we'd had in the back of a vehicle. And it was our kind of chill out area. And also I had a little speaker with some music. So, yeah, once in a while you could charge it up because there was some electric. I think there was one electric point we had. So you could sparingly use that. And yeah, I had some music going once in a while, not all the time, but a little bit of music, and that's great for morale. And I think obviously I had no kettles or anything, but we just had a hexi burner, making a cup of coffee and stuff. And I made a little sign up. I ripped a side off a ration box, drew a PF badge on it, and wrote "Cafe Del Gip." Come for the brew, stay for the slaggins. So slagging is just taking a piss out of each other. Yeah. And yeah, it's one of those things that ended up being like a little morale area where you come in and just rip the shit out of each other and stuff like that. Yeah.
Fantastic. And in terms of, like, you had some MREs, like, what were you actually serving up?
It was just a mixture of MREs and British rations. American MREs, because there was an American Special Forces unit based next to us back in Price.
Right.
And they had a whole load of MREs, and we obviously stole them off them. As you do in the British Army, you steal kit off other people, just to mix up the rations, because at the time it was the old style rations that you get a box of 10 and it's all the same meal. And sometimes you might just have that. So you might be eating the same meal for like a week or 2 weeks sometimes, and it's always nice to mix it up with other rations. But yeah, that's all. We didn't have any fresh food or anything, but we did actually buy some pasta from the local like bazaar when we were in Musa Qala before everything shut down, and that was a really good idea because we actually ran out of food.
Oh wow. What about water though? Did you have access to?
So there was a well there on the site that we were in, so we did have water, and we had a shed load of water in the vehicles as well. We used to go out with an awful lot of water in the jerry cans, but that's only going to last you a certain amount of time before it runs out. But yeah, there was water, luckily. And when we were able to get resupplies, they dropped off crates of bottled water as well. Yeah.
And it's interesting you mentioned that about the provisions you take and what you end up needing. So you were being told originally, as the Pathfinders were told, they were going to be there for 96 hours, and they were still there 7 weeks later. Could you maybe explain why was it that what was supposed to be a 4-day mission turned into 7 weeks?
A case of that everyone was just tasked and fixed in locations that they weren't, originally planned to be in, and we was the only people available to do what we was doing. We were meant to be relieved in place. That mission didn't work.
Right.
So the company that was meant to be, it's called being RIT, River Leading Place, they were meant to be coming in to take over from us. That didn't happen because they couldn't get to us. They actually got attacked when they were coming into us. So we weren't meant to be there for that long. We ended up having to stay there. And yeah, it was a long few weeks.
Yeah, and you're living in one pair of combats for 7 weeks?
Absolutely.
Or how did it work?
So it's like, 45, 50 degrees, it's red hot. You're living in pretty rough conditions. The toilets consisted of half a cut off oil drum. You're peeing and crapping not far from where you're sleeping. You've got no real washing facilities. There was like a tap thing that you could have a semi-shower under once in a while, but not all the time. Obviously, you've got very, very bare minimum kit with you. And we all ended up with diarrhea and stuff like that. It's one of those things that you can't really avoid when you're living in those conditions. So just that itself, just the living in that tough environment is hard, let alone being attacked every day,
Yeah.
Wow. It was a tough few weeks.
So, and then the resupplies, there's helicopters, was it? Drop in water and food and...
Yeah. So we was being resupplied by Chinooks. They'd come in, they'd have underslung loads that they'd drop. Sometimes they'd do an underslung load drop and then they'd land and then they'd push a load of like crates of water off the back and stuff like that. And I was actually marking the landing zone personally because you can't just expect them to kind of come and land, especially at night.
Right.
They do this at night quite often. So you have a thing called an infrared strobe, a firefly. So it's like a light strobe thing, but it's got an infrared cap on it. Mm-hmm. And you basically kneel down, hold the light up, and then that'd be the position where they'd land. And yeah, the downdraft from a Chinook's pretty hectic.
Yeah.
And I remember one night I was marking this and it came in and landed, and literally it felt like, I don't know, like you're in the middle of a whirlwind with rocks being blown in your face and everything. Little stones and everything, sand everywhere and all that, Yeah, so that was quite... And you've got to trust the pilot's not going to land on top of you as well in the middle of the night as it's getting browned out with all this dust everywhere. So that's quite a
wow. And while they're bringing in air, I mean, that is like, there's probably no unit in the British Army that can do that as well as Pathfinders, though, right? In terms of choosing...
Yeah, it's one of our specialities, definitely.
And then Mark can bring it in. And then in terms of fast air or fire support, was that on call or was it touch and go?
So we brought in loads of airstrikes, and as I say, multinational as well. So not just British, but American, but also French as well. I can't remember any others, but we definitely had French, American, and British. Sometimes it was a show of force.
Yeah.
So that's where you bring an aircraft in low and loud to make them think, think twice about attacking you because there's this big aircraft coming in, and But other times it would be strafing runs by A-10s,
right? And
that was amazing to see. And it was just like an A-10, like for me, was my favourite aircraft growing up. It's the plane designed around a gun. I mean, you can't get a cooler aircraft than that. And to see this thing coming in and live firing for real. Taking out targets was just something else.
That's incredible.
And the sound of those rounds hitting the ground was just something else. And really, really close to our compound, within a couple hundred metres, seeing and hearing these rounds coming in was just something else. It was amazing. Yeah, and we had a low flyover with a B-1 bomber once, and I've never seen anything like it in my life. It came in so low, it blocked out the sun.
Wow.
And you didn't hear it coming because obviously it's coming in low and fast. And we knew what direction it was coming. Obviously, we call it in, we tell it where to fly and stuff. So we knew where it was coming from. And I looked up and I saw this plane. It just looked like something off a sci-fi film, just like blocked out the sun. And it appeared in my mind to just stop there for like a semi-second. And then it was gone. And it was so loud, it was like blowing your eardrums out loud. It was amazing.
Wow.
Like I say, the American support we had was absolutely great.
Fantastic. In terms of support, because also you talked about the 50 cals, and I've read this in Patrick Bishop's book. Was it true that actually the ammo you were given didn't work initially? What happened there?
Yeah, so before I got to Afghanistan, when the PF first got there, because they were there for about 6 weeks or something before I got there, because I was on my course. Apparently what had happened was the ammo that they got for the 50 cals was not up to standard. Somebody told me it was made in India or something. I don't know if that's true, but they were getting stoppages every round, or just about every single round. And when you have a stoppage on a 50 cal, it's not easy to clear it because it's a big, heavy beast to operate. So it's definitely not ideal. Our head shed in the PF managed to do some wheelering and dealering, and they managed to get some 50 cal ammunition off the Canadians.
Right.
And it worked perfectly.
Right, awesome.
The weird thing was, though, it was green. So normally tracers are red. Normally communist ammunition is green for tracers. But when we were using the 50 cals, it was green tracer, which was like a bit weird. So there was one contact in particular where we had all the Jimpies and 50 cals firing at the same time, and it was like a laser light show. It was amazing because it was last light, and you just saw these rounds going past our heads and that like this. It was freaking amazing.
Canadian built arms ammunition. So the little experience I do have in the Dutch National Reserves, we had the DeMarco C7 I had, and it was all Canadian, but it was under license by Colt.
That's right.
But as it happens, when I was in the Dutch Army would use Canadian-made rifles and ammunition, and it was great. I never had any issues with it. So
the C8 became the UK SF rifle as well, which is the shortened version of the C7, and it's like a tougher version of an M4, and it's a great rifle. We had those in the PF just after we come back from Afghan, actually.
Because back then it was the SA80.
It was SA80, and then we went to the C8 in 2007.
Cool. Any issue? Were you happy with the SA80, the way it performed in that
It wasn't brilliant, to be honest, but it was the A2 version, which was the improved version.
Okay.
It wasn't great, but it was okay. It did the job. But the fact is, there's lots of little gaps in there for sand and dust to get in.
Right.
You're in a sandy, dusty environment in Afghanistan, so you had to clean it constantly, like every day. You had to make sure it was clean, which isn't ideal when you're operating in a small unit in close proximity to the enemy, cleaning the weapon all the time. You had to make sure you kept it clean. There was one point where I was in a contact where I was having to forward assist it every single shot.
Wow.
Take a shot, tap forward, take a shot, tap forward, like this. So it wasn't just firing like this.
No.
So that's not ideal.
In terms of ammo, your day-to-day loadout, are you carrying like 100? Like, what are you carrying? Like, how many?
So Pathfinder SOPs was 10 magazines, I think.
Okay. Oh wow.
300 rounds.
Yeah.
Plus a couple of HE grenades, plus a couple of FOS grenades. Pistol with, I think, 2 magazines. Back then it was the Browning high power, and then whatever you've got in the vehicles.
Yeah.
Thousands of rounds for the 50 cal GPMG.
And that's not even counting your water and food. So you're carrying 30, 40 pounds just for starters.
I mean, you're talking when you're on patrol, probably 90 pounds.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's including,
90 pounds, Jesus.
Yeah, your body armor, your helmet,
your
water, your ammo, the radios, and everything else is probably about 90 pounds-ish.
Because you read these books and you think, surely that wasn't really 90 pounds, but it really was, yeah. Bloody hell, yeah. That's heavy. That's like carrying a child on your shoulder anyway, yeah.
And then having to take a knee every 2 minutes.
Yeah. Getting back to the duration of this siege, what was did you see that taking a mental pressure? Did people maybe start to behave differently, or can you talk me through that?
Yeah, so, what was tough was the fact that we kept getting told we were going to be relieved, and then it didn't happen. And then we're under attack, everyone's probably thinking the same thing, am I going to get through this? And I remember one time in particular, we was getting mortared, and you could hear the screeching sound of these mortars coming in. And the only thing you could do, because we couldn't dig trenches, there was nowhere to dig them, the ground was too hard, all you could do was get into some sort of hard cover into the buildings.
Yeah.
And then it's not perfect cover, but it's better than being outside, because it's going to stop the shrapnel, Anyway, there's mortars coming in, and as I was going into a building, there was a guy come running out, and he was an attached guy. He wasn't a Pathfinder. Good bloke, but I think his nerve had gone. It cracked. Right. And he was panicking. He had this look on his face where he wasn't seeing. He was just running away from the danger, but he was running outside of the building.
Wow.
So as he come running out, I was going through the same doorway. I literally grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and went, "Where the fuck are you going?" And he just went and just collapsed.
Oh, wow.
And I was holding him up by the scruff of his neck. And I was just like, "Get back inside the building." And he was just in bits. He'd broken. I mean, he was okay afterwards to a degree, but I think mentally he'd kind of broke.
Yeah.
He was supposed to have gone back a week before then.
Okay.
And I think in his mind he'd kind of set himself a goal to get out of this place. And there was no real end date.
Yeah.
Because we were just, again, you just deal with what you got.
Yeah.
And this guy had broken, poor bloke.
In the book by Patrick Bishop, there is a guy, Abdul Wuli, also known as Coco, is described there as quite a character who had fought the Soviets, then fought the Mujahideen, fought the Taliban, as your chief of police. Can you tell me a bit about him?
I think he also fought for the Taliban as well.
Oh, right.
I think he'd actually been in the Taliban as well.
Oh, really?
So we'd done a bit of everything. Yeah, he was there. And yeah, he was on the, because like I say about the ICOMs, it was just open nets. You could, if you wanted to go onto the Taliban net, he'd go on the Taliban net. And I heard him having a slagging match with him one night.
Really?
I couldn't hear what he was saying, but you could hear by the tone of his voice that he was sort of goading these guys. And the interpreter was saying, apparently he was saying, yeah, come on in, have a go. I've got the Brits here with me now.
Really?
Have a go if you think you're hard enough, sort of thing.
I mean, it's a warrior people, isn't it? Like they've had the Russians, they've been at war for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So at some point there was an ambush on an American convoy passing through your area. Was that something? Do you remember that? What happened there? Or?
Oh yeah, that was the first day I got there.
Oh right.
So for the day one in Musa Qala, I'd literally been there an hour, and we were put on stand 2. Stand 2 means everyone is on, defensive positions, and we was told that this American convoy was going to be passing by, not right next to us, but not far away, about a kilometre or so away, in a wadi that was parallel to where we were. So we was put on standby just in case something was going to happen, and it did. They got attacked. We was too far away to be able to help them in any way. Plus, we couldn't have kind of all just left the compound anyway, because we were there to defend the compound. But anyway, we were put on standby to respond to anything, and literally there was me and another guy probably stood this close to each other, and a round went straight past our heads in between us. That's how close a single shot. So I'm thinking probably a sniper, because it wasn't a burst like an AK would normally be, a burst or at least rapid shots. And a round went straight between our heads, and it was so close I felt the shockwave of the round. So it must have been really close to my head, and I was like, we both dropped below the level of this wall. And we looked at each other and just burst out laughing. We just looked at each other and just started laughing, which is the sort of thing that normally happens when you have a near-death experience, as long as everything's all right. But that was my kind of introduction to Musa Qala, nearly being killed on hour 1.
And you're absolutely right, because the Danish guy you referred to earlier got shot on the head. And he did actually survive, and he wrote a book. I looked into it, and that was sniper fire. Sniper fire to the skull, and lucky enough, just an inch, where he actually survived. But yeah, to your point, no shooting to kill. Take an aim at, amazing. I mean, for you to survive that anyway, thankfully.
Just luck.
So at one point, and you referenced it a little bit earlier, reinforcements arrived, 20 men of 6th Platoon, B Company, 3 Parachute Guards, Parachute Platoon. And before we get into it, tell me how that fits, Guards Parachute, how does that fit into the
Guards
Brigade?
It's a bit of a historic thing, and it actually has got a link to the Pathfinders, because back in the 60s, the Pathfinders for the Airborne Brigade were actually the Guards Parachute Company. So they were made up from the Guards. They had to do P Company and stuff, but they used to wear a parachute regiment cap badge with the Guards backing.
Okay.
So that was the Pathfinders for the brigade back in the 60s and early 70s. So what they do now is the Guards, if they want, they can come and do P Company and come and serve in 3 para in that platoon.
Okay.
And that's now the Guards Para Platoon. So they came out and reinforced us. I don't know when it was, but we'd been there a little while. They were like chalk and cheese compared to us, because they just come from, a nice comfy base in comparison. All clean shaven and clean uniforms and all that sort of stuff. And there was us just like, if you're living in 40-50 degree heat every day with no change of kit, you're going to look pretty grimy, aren't you? All of us had beards like this and stuff, and I think they were all a little bit like, flipping heck, who are these guys? But they were welcome. They were only with us for a short amount of time before they then had to go back, and they were, I think they were the brigade kind of standby unit to be deployed for things like reinforcing other units.
So the moment they arrive, you start planning, right, we're going to re-divvy up the stags, they basically just get put to work.
Absolutely, straight away, as soon as I got there, and it gave us a chance to kind of rest a little bit. It's not like we all just downed arms and didn't do anything, but it gave us more of a gap in between having to stag on and stuff like that, so that it was a welcome addition, and more people to use for things like patrolling out and stuff as well.
Later in June, you were relieved by G Battery 7 RHA, the Paris Air Mobile Artillery Support Unit. How did that go? Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, they come and reinforced us. Yeah, we had 7 RHA with us, a unit from 7 RHA for a while, and engineers as well. And again, it was great to have just some more bodies to help with the patrols and stagging on and stuff. And the engineers actually brought in a load of sandbags and stuff, which was great. And they got to work building actual sangers.
Oh,
Before
fantastic.
they came in, it was just makeshift stuff. We didn't have any materials to make anything with. And obviously they brought the expertise of how to make these things properly as well.
Yes.
So they put together some decent sort of defensive positions for us, which was great.
And in terms of your little CAF that you were running, was that throughout the weeks that you were there? Or,
the whole time.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
the whole time.
Awesome. In the week leading up to 11th of July, Pathfinder had been mounting patrols every night, creeping around the wadi, trying to set up ambushes. Were you personally involved in that? Do you recall those patrols around the compound?
Yeah, so as soon as we got there, we were putting patrols out, daytime and nighttime. And initially, it was a little bit like going back to the Northern Ireland thing, because we were also trying to engage with the locals, hearts and minds, that sort of thing. But then it got to the stage where all the locals left because the Taliban were coming in. They'd obviously got the word and they buggered off. And
So when you see civvies leaving, that is a flag to you then?
Yeah, it's a combat indicator, as they call it. So we knew it was going to kick off from that point.
Right.
And at that stage, there wasn't any hearts and minds going on. It was just standby sort of thing. Still patrols going out, but if you saw anyone, they're probably going to be enemy.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I can imagine that sort of changes the tone a bit when actually it's just you against them.
Yeah.
In terms of those patrols, that sounds pretty scary. So how many people would be going on these?
It's just working in your normal patrols of 6.
Okay.
So you have a patrol of 6, but there'd be multiple patrols at the same time, as in, you'd be like maybe 3 or 4 patrols of 6, and then you'd rotate into different areas. Very similar to Northern Ireland, actually, how we was conducting it. So you wouldn't all just walk down the road in one big column.
No.
You'd have one 6 here, another 6 here. One would go firm whilst another one would move, and you'd have communication between each other, telling each other where you're going and that sort of thing. And there'd be points where you'd stop and you'd just observe and wait.
Yeah.
Kind of like a snap ambush in a way, but not an actual snap ambush, but kind of if you saw something, you're ready to take them on. Whereas other patrols would be moving to just see what's going on. So coordinated patrolling throughout the night and daytime as well.
And then would you always have like a GPMG with you on those patrols, or?
I think we were just carrying LMGs.
Oh, okay.
So LMGs plus the UGLs on the C8s.
Okay.
Normal rifles,
Awesome. And while you were holding Musa Qala, a few kilometres south at Sangin, the battle group was fighting its own war. There was an Operation Augustus went in on the 14th, which was an air assault hunting a Taliban commander, so a high-value target. And Sangin, and they were using helicopters closer. Did you know what was going on at the time, or again, you'd be in your own bubble and only find out the intel?
So on the updates we'd get, we weren't told in any great detail about operations going on as such. You maybe just get a bit of an outline of this has happened, this is what's been achieved, or any casualties as such. So we were probably updated on that, but not only in a very brief details.
Right. And then by the 16th of July, actually this is where, and we talked about the Danes earlier, 16th of July, a Danish recce squadron was going to take over. There was actually a whole bunch of them that were going to arrive. And then the small advance party arrived to sort of recce for the bigger group. And the larger force completely had to turn back because of an ambush and insufficient troops to clear the area. And they were the ones carrying the actual supplies. So do you remember that sort of a small band of Danes coming in when it's supposed to be a lot more? Did they have some supplies at all? Or?
I can't remember exactly, but I think probably what happened was, because they got inserted by air, and there was only a couple of them, like 3 guys maybe. I think it might have been the OC or something like that. I'm guessing what probably happened is the helicopter that brought them in brought supplies as well. So it's not like the Danish were carrying any kit. It was just like, there'd probably be an aircraft underslung load, drop that, guys get out, helicopter takes off. That's probably, I'm guessing, from what I can't remember exactly.
Then we get to the 24th of July, and there is a major attack, this going by Patrick Bishop's book, on the Musa Qala district centre. Roughly 300 fighters hit every side of the base. Is that an attack that you can record? What happened there?
And there was a massive attack. It was daytime as well, which is unusual, because if we was to do something like that, we'd probably do it at night. And they put in a concerted effort to try and basically swamp us and take us all out and they got their ass handed to them. We kicked their asses.
Wow.
And one of the most amazing things that I saw whilst I was there is there was one area that was a little bit of an open area they were approaching from. They were trying to attack us.
Coming through!
And we put in a shed load of firepower onto it with 50 cals and GPMGs.
Compound 30.
Hold on to your smoke grenade! It's gone!
And it just, if you've ever watched Full Metal Jacket where they get contacted in that industrial region and they're shooting up this building, it looked like that. Because there was a big wall behind them and all you saw was these strike marks from 50 cals and GMPs like, and the tracer going down range. It was just amazing. It was, and we just...
And at that point, you're behind cover.
I think there was, I can't remember whether the sandbag positions were built by this stage or not, but most of us were just on top of buildings behind small walls and stuff. Yeah.
And did that go on for like hours or like?
It was probably about an hour or something like that. But yeah, they didn't get anywhere near to achieving what they wanted to.
Did air get involved?
I can't remember exactly, but I think we brought some in towards the last stage. But by that stage, it was over. We just fought our own battle. There was nothing on standby because we didn't know it was coming.
In terms of talking through the timeline, that was 24th of July, and by the 2nd of August is this incident of Sergeant Morten Mathiasen, who was prone in Overwatch on a rooftop. He's the guy that was hit by a sniper, we talked about that before, where it was unable to get him out until the Americans came in. So at this point, you've had the massive attack on the 24th of July. Within a week, another guy is hit and is not taken out for a whole night until the Americans arrived. So the reality of CASEVAC cannot be relied upon. How does that feel when you realise you've taken so much attack, so much fire, wounded?
It's not good because there's a good chance someone's going to get hit or hurt. It doesn't give you much confidence when you know they haven't got your back, basically, that you're not going to get CASEVAC if you get hurt. Because you don't mind putting your life on the line as long as you've got support. But when you know you've got no support, it doesn't give you a lot of confidence, I've got to say. It was not good for morale, that.
The full Danish recce squadron actually finally arrived at 1:30 on the morning of the 26th of July, after a 48-hour trek from Bastion involving a long detour and an attempted ambush. Corporal Newell had gone ahead to lead the way in.
Sergeant Major Newell.
I forgot it wrong. Sergeant Major Newell had gone ahead to lead the way in, and then, do you recall what happened?
Yeah, so what they'd done is, we knew they were coming. Obviously, they'd radioed ahead and given us an ETA. And we were all stood too, so every person in the compound was in a defensive position overlooking an area. And what they've done is they're dismounted, because obviously if you're moving through an urban area, if you're just in vehicles, it's a big threat. So they have dismounted troops to basically make sure that nobody's hiding in an alleyway waiting to shoot an RPG at you or something like that. So as far as I know, Andy was at the head of the column because he was the only guy that had been there before. So he was kind of leading them in. And one of the AMP guys that was on his sentry position, for a reason that I don't know, just started shooting at him.
Jesus.
Just started shooting at that convoy coming in, which is a crazy thing to do because the Taliban they didn't have armoured vehicles.
Yes.
They do now, thanks to the Americans. But, they didn't have armoured vehicles. So these guys were driving in armoured vehicles and, started shooting at him and shot Andy through the arm. And it went through his bicep and out the other side. And it shattered, I think, this bone into something like 17 pieces and took out a fist-sized lump of flesh out the back of his arm. And he could have easily died from that because obviously you've got a big artery going through the body. And he was brought in, and luckily we had a surgeon with us that was embedded with us as our doctor, and he worked on him straight away. I went in to see him, and he was laid down on a stretcher with oxygen on and stuff like this. So luckily he had some good care there, ready to look after him, because he could have died from that. And I was really, really pissed off about this, because it wasn't the Taliban guy that had shot him. It was one of our own. And this guy, I don't know if he was on drugs or whether he just panicked or both, I don't know. But he's just started shooting at our own guys for no reason whatsoever.
Because a British soldier doing anything like that, that's court-martial. They were in real trouble then.
Yeah. And we knew they were coming.
Yeah.
It wasn't news. We knew they were coming. We all stood to waiting for them. We even knew what direction they were coming from. So I have no idea what made that guy do that. But it was not a good thing.
Did you have, because when I first met you, you have a brother that went with you into...
So he was one para in Red Devils.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. And he just then pursued a completely different career, or?
Yeah, so he's out the army now, and he worked as a tandem parachute instructor when he left the army after being in Red Devils.
Yeah, so Battle Group Operation Cpl, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, finally got you guys out on the 6th of August after 52 days. Did you remember how that went and what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't the first operation where they tried extracting us.
Right.
I think it was maybe the third. Mm-hmm. And I think I got to the stage where I was just like, are we ever going to get out of here?
Yeah.
But that time they put in a far bigger effort because they'd realised how much of a big deal it was going to be punching through the Taliban.
Yeah.
Because they were surrounding us basically. And yeah, it was a big operation, lots of troops, and it was great to extract out of there.
Yeah.
And I was actually the lead vehicle. So when we left, obviously we were in our Wimics.
Yeah.
And we had to move out of that place. And between where we were, because there was friendly forces like a distance out, that sort of distance in between was obviously the dangerous part before we got to friendly troops. And we had to drive in soft vehicles through an urban area, which is a massive recipe for disaster. You know? We had no troops on the ground sort of lining the route, like defending the route or anything. And the Taliban had 2 months or so to sow IEDs anywhere they wanted, in between us doing patrols and stuff. And I was 100% expecting to die. I thought I was going to get killed. Yeah. Because I was in the lead vehicle, in a soft vehicle, and I thought I was going to get IEDs. Because
you were going by a route that was well known and could be predicted.
Well, there's only a couple of routes we could have gone.
Yeah.
There's only like 3 ways I think we could have gone, and I thought, I'm definitely going to get chopped here.
Wow.
And I was, on the GPMG, basically sweeping every potential ambush point, but the big danger was IEDs rather than getting shot at.
Right.
But we got through all right, and when we eventually got to an area where we was out in the desert in a wadi, it was great to feel in relative safety.
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't back at Bastion by a long shot, but we were out of the town in an area where we could see for distance, and that was a safety sort of area. Yeah, it was good.
As you know, there was a fatality in that extraction. Private Barry Cutts, 19-year-old from Nottinghamshire, 13-hour assault regiment, RLC. What can you tell me about that?
So, I didn't see that incident happening. I heard he was on a top cover on a vehicle on the gun on the top of a Wimic and was shot. So I didn't see or hear that actual thing happening. I heard about it afterwards, and it's quite a sad thing to hear about. So
so he was doing a job you were doing effectively.
Exactly,
you're manning the gun.
On a soft vehicle. So show you how dangerous it is. R.I.P. that bloke, and thanks for his sacrifice to one of the guys that helped us extract out of that location.
Wow. Yeah. You would go on, and we will go into more detail about the period immediately after, but just zoom out a bit. You have gone on to achieve senior command positions in the paras. How does leadership respond to losing people like that, and how do you handle the troops, really, the blokes?
Yeah, like in a subsequent tour in 2010, we had a guy killed in my platoon, and it's a tough thing to deal with. But the fact is, you just got to get on with your job. Yeah. You do what you can to rally the troops and stuff, and give people a bit of a hug that are suffering or whatever. But at the end of the day, as a soldier, you just got to get on with it.
Yeah.
It's not like in the civilian world where you take the day off because you're feeling down and upset. You literally get on with it. You just, make sure you're good to go, because otherwise someone else is going to die.
With 20 years distance, as someone who spent almost 7 weeks defending one of these platoon houses, and it's always easy in hindsight, so I do make that proviso. But in terms of tactics, strategy, the whole platoon house set up, did you have thoughts about it now with the benefit of hindsight?
Well, basically, the biggest problem in what we was doing was we didn't have enough troops.
Right.
Or, resources, things like helicopters to actually do our job effectively. Whoever put the planning in for this operation, I don't think they took it seriously enough, the threat that we were facing. And we were going in the Taliban's heartland, for God's sake.
Yeah.
First people to go there. So why they only put one battle group in is ridiculous. But that tends to happen quite a lot with the UK military, is they don't actually, we're not very well resourced for the job we're asked to do quite often. Yeah. So, you know, subsequent tours later on, they've made it a brigade operation, which is at least what it should have been. But that first time we went, we didn't have nearly enough troops or helicopters, etc. for what we were doing.
Just in terms of respectful of the timeline, because you mentioned Bryan Budd earlier, the 20th of August. What happened there with Bryan Budd? Was he still in Pathfinder? How did he get up to that point of the 20th of August of his heroic action?
Okay, so Bryan was a really good friend of mine. I lived right next to him in the block in Aldershot, sorry. And yeah, really good friend. Went out on the piss with him and stuff like that. We were in the same patrol in Kosovo and Macedonia. So I knew him very well, really good mate and really nice fella. What had happened is he got married, he had a young kid, his first kid, and he wanted to be closer to his family. So he left the Pathfinders voluntarily to take on an instructional role at Harrogate, which is close to where his family were, up north. So he took a 2-year gap. You know, it's one of those things you do in your career, you know, you do an instructional role and stuff like that. And it just meant that he got more family time whilst he had a young kid. His 2 years ended. He then he wanted to come back to the Pathfinders, but for some reason he didn't get that option, and he had to go back to his parent unit, which was 3 Para. And he wasn't there for very long by the time he was killed. I don't know how long it was, but he hadn't been back to battalion very long when he was killed. And I heard.
I think in June. It says he joined A Company 3 Para only in June.
Yeah, so there you go, 2 months. So I heard about his death on one of the update things, and that was quite a hard one to swallow. Really, it was a tough one, that, because I knew he had a young kid, and I knew he had another young one on the way. His wife was pregnant, and I knew his wife as well, and that was a very sad one. That it was a tough one to. I didn't even know he was back in 3 Para. I knew he was. I knew he'd gone back to Harrogate. I didn't know he'd come back 3 Para because, you know, you're in your own little world and stuff. I didn't know what he was doing then because we were out in Afghan. And yeah, when I heard about his name come up on the casualty thing, that was really sad.
Yeah. Obviously, it then became clear that he had actually perished in the defence of his fellow troopers. Do you want to talk about the action? Or?
I only know what I've read, but I do also know guys that were in his section, guys that were in his platoon, and they've all had nothing but the best things to say about him. The fact that he was an aggressive paratrooper, doing his job, taking on the enemy, taking a fight to them, you know. And they were sweeping through a cornfield, from what I can gather. They'd come under fire. He'd taken his section round to do a flanking attack. They'd come under fire again, and he basically just went for it and assaulted the enemy position, but was killed in the action.
Yeah. I think he was found with like 3 bodies
around him.
And to your point, a second girl that was born in September. Talking about the home front, I think most guys have some sort of home front, whether it's a mum and dad or a wife and kids. So during what role does that play? And is that a big part of your day-to-day, or not at all? Or do you guys talk about your home front, or how does...
to a degree. I think it just depends on how well you know each other and that sort of thing. But really, when you're actually out on operations and stuff, it's all about just getting the job done, really. Yeah. But when you're maybe in quiet periods in somewhere like Musa Qala, and you're just like, say you're living there for weeks on end, you know, in places like the Cafe del Gip, you might be just chatting about your girlfriend or your wife or kids or whatever. And sometimes you get to know a little bit more about people's background in those sort of situations. Because back in the UK, when you're on exercises and courses and stuff, there's not that sort of quiet time, really.
Yes.
Whereas, somewhere like Musa Qala, you do tend to find a little bit more out about people, about their backgrounds and all that.
Was there any opportunity for blokes to talk to children or wives in Musa Qala, or was it complete radio silence?
I think, if I remember, we had the sat phones out there. But, it was only very rare we had the chance to use them. It wasn't very often we had the chance to use them.
And also no internet, I would imagine. None of that.
Yeah, the best thing we had were blueies. So the letters, the electronic letters that your partner or whoever can write a letter to you on an email, and then it gets delivered to you as a physical letter.
Okay.
We had one mail drop, and the only mail I got was my divorce papers.
Oh my God, really? Jesus.
That was a right morale boost.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did that feel?
A bit of a kick in the teeth, to be honest. But yeah, that's life.
Jesus. So you went from 96 hours, it became 52 days. You then hand over on the 6th of August. Were you able to warn incoming troops? Like, how does that handover go?
No, there was none.
Oh, really?
So basically, the Danish were staying. I think they at least, I think the Danish stayed on. We were going, so they had the opportunity to brief up the incoming guys.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were basically just on the move. There was no messing around.
Yeah.
I think maybe the OC had a quick face-to-face with their OC. I'm not sure, but from my perspective, I didn't get a chance to talk to anyone about anything. We were just on our way.
And that was Jowett, I guess. He wrote a book as well.
Adam Jowett, a really good guy. I know him quite well, actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So was he para officer, but he was in command of Irish Rangers, or was he?
So no, he was. I think he was guards.
Okay.
Like his job was actually in Brigade HQs, from what I know, but he was then given command of that company, Easy Company, which was an additional company for free para, made up of the Royal Irish Rangers. There were some free para guys in that company as well, and I know some of those blokes. Hugh Keir, in particular, who does a HAHO podcast.
Yes, that's great.
He was a sniper in that.
He was in Musa Qala, was he? Oh, really?
With the Easy Company.
Oh, wow.
And also one of the guys that's on Combat Dealers, Freddie Kruger.
Okay.
So the guy, his nickname's obviously Freddie Kruger. He's on the program called Combat Dealers, and he was there with them as well. So he was a 3-para.
I know HAHO. I've obviously completely different channels, but I haven't actually. I'm not sure I know that one.
Combat Dealers is a really good program. It's ex-para.
Yeah, that's interesting. So briefly about the Danes, because you mentioned they were doing a handover. What was that day-to-day relationship like? 'Cause I believe their unit was called the Griffins. As soldiers, as people, how did you interact with them?
It was great to get them coming in and reinforcing us. And I believe the initial plan was they was going to come in, and then a couple of days later we was going to go.
Yeah.
But it didn't actually work out like that. We ended up getting stuck there for a while longer. It was great to get them on, because they had a whole company worth of guys.
Yeah.
A lot of people with a lot of weapons, armoured vehicles, all that sort of stuff. But here's the thing. The Danes hadn't fought since World War II.
Right.
No combat experience whatsoever. And we did find that they were a little bit hesitant. So when we were told, right, this is what we're going to do, and there were sometimes we'd had ICOM chat, right, okay, we're going to get ambushed, we're going to get attacked from this area. We'd basically strike first. They were like looking at us as if to say, are we shooting now? So, should we shoot? Right. It was a little while before they kind of got into that more aggressive mindset of, let's take the enemy on. They were kind of, not to criticise them, but they felt more like peacetime soldiers. Yeah. Once they got into it, they did get into it. But it took them a little while to kind of warm up into it, I think.
And they certainly took their share of casualties. Actually, I've completely forgot about the outpost attack. There was an outpost attack where one of the Danish officers, Rydal, fell down. Yep. There was RPG hit the tower. Do you remember what happened there? Or?
Yeah, so we had a thing called the outpost. It was on like an outbuilding. So we had the main compound, and then we had a ladder that went across to another building. And the reason why we had that is because it had a good view out onto approaches to our compound, But it was out on a limb. So we had a Sanger built there out of sandbags. That was one of the things the engineers did. But it was definitely quite a dodgy place to be.
Yeah.
And one day they basically smashed it with an RPG. And there was a mate of mine that was in the Sanger when it got hit. Right. He literally ran for his life when it hit. And when he got to where I was, he was like, Tom, he basically stripped and just went, Tom, check me. Because he didn't know whether he'd been hit with anything. He could have been in shock. Yeah. And he basically got me to check his back and everything to make sure there was no entry holes for shrapnel and stuff. Because he goes, I was inside that when it went off. Yeah. I was inside the Sanger when it exploded. And he was shitting himself. And then, one of the Danish guys had fallen through because basically the roof collapsed and he went through into this internal part of the building. And a couple of the guys ran over there to his aid, put some rounds down on the attacking guys, and then rescued him. And one of those guys that went in to get him was Mark Wilson, Military Cross.
Yeah, I think there was an Australian, Tony. There was
Tony,
okay. And then, interesting. Were they then Australian-born people who joined Para Reg, or you actually had embedded Australian troops?
He was attached to us.
Okay.
So he was from what's now called 2 Commando, which is their Tier 2 SF. And he was attached to us for a 6-month exchange posting. They just happened to come just before we went to Afghanistan. Yeah. And so he got a very lucky, well, in one way, a lucky draw to go straight into an operational deployment. Yeah.
Just to describe it for the viewer, so you've got this tower that's sort of an advanced post, really, where they get RPG. There's no one else there to help them, so these guys had to literally go over the compound wall, run to a tower that's being attacked, and then drag one of the others. I think was still able to walk themselves, and then they dragged him, and he was awarded with, I think, the military anti-military cross. Yeah. What was it?
Mark Wilson.
Oh, Mark Wilson. Sorry, Mark Wilson. Yeah. So, easy company. These are the guys who took over from you. They faced 6 attacks on their first day, and they're 150 plus fighter assault 3 weeks later. I guess that would not surprise you, given what you'd...
Yeah, we was getting attacked pretty much every day, sometimes multiple times. Yeah.
Part of this interview is also about remembering those who gave the ultimate sacrifice. So on the 1st of September, after you guys had gone, a direct mortar hit on the Alamo killed Ranger Anna Dravia and fatally wounded Lance Corporal Paul Muirhead of the patrols platoon. And they paid the same price, or paid the highest price at the same base weeks after your unit left. I guess, was this news still feeding back to you?
So again, we were getting the updates every day, even when you're not on the ground. And it just went to show you how lucky we were, actually.
Yeah.
That we didn't get the fatalities that Easy Company sadly got. We didn't actually get any fatalities whilst we were there. And part of that's going to be professionalism, but a lot of it's going to be luck as well.
Yeah. So, after you're extracted, were you given leave? Did you go home, or what happened next?
No. Knows the answer to that. No, we got back to Fob Price.
Yeah.
And we actually, fair play to Gilly, who was our Sergeant Major at the time. He'd stepped up as a Sergeant Major because Andy Newell got shot. So Gilly organised a semi kind of party for us, and we all basically, we got some beer from somewhere. We'd had a few beers, bearing in mind we'd not had a beer for a few months.
Wow.
And we played some silly party games and got a bit pissed, and they just let off some steam.
Yeah.
But that was still in a fob. And then we basically just had a little bit of time. We had a few days to recover, and then was back on the job.
Wow.
Just back out on the ground doing normal PF taskings, reconnaissance and engaging with locals, ground truth stuff, all that sort of thing. Yeah.
So how long after this hellish, very brutal 6-7 weeks, did you still stay in Helmand then?
About another 4 months.
Oh, wow.
Something like that. Well, a couple of months, a few months anyway.
And it's not like you're going on leave and it's not like the Americans in Vietnam when they went to Hawaii for a couple of weeks.
No, it was literally the only time we had that was relatively stable was when we was back in Fob Price, and we'd be there for maybe a couple of days in between going out for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So you go out for a couple of weeks, do your job, come back. The main job after that was replanning all your kit. So rebombing your magazines and you're replanning the ammunition on the vehicles, refueling the vehicles, getting any work done on repair work, refilling all the jerry cans, water and fuel, rations. So you do all that first before you relax, clean the weapons and stuff as well. And then you maybe get the chance to relax for a couple of days, and then you're doing your planning for the next stop and then straight into the next one.
So what was your specific role in those months that followed during those
So I was
PF tasks?
I was a patrol commander, and initially I was the lead vehicle for the whole platoon. So I was in that dangerous point where you're getting ready to drive over a bloody IED the whole time you're out on patrol.
Wow.
And we did get into quite a big contact whilst I was a lead vehicle as well. We were breaking into a town, basically forming an entry point for a company to go in and do an operation. We knew the Taliban were there. And we actually come under contact as we was breaking in, and that was the point where I was saying where it was like a laser light show, because I was the lead vehicle. We come under contact, and RPG just missed us. Everyone had fanned out, and there was just basically rounds going past our vehicle, 50 cal GPMG, and it was just going into night, I think, last light. So you just see everything just getting lit up as we're driving back towards all the guns firing, by the way, 50 cal GPMG, it was flipping amazing. Wow. It was brilliant. But quite a dangerous job being the lead vehicle.
How did you finally break up that contact?
By doing that contact drill.
Okay.
We got the RPG fired at us. I put a burst in from the GPMG. Being the lead vehicle, obviously you're out in front. We then turned around and started coming back. We did one bound, you stop like this, put rounds down again. And I actually had an underslung grenade launcher. And I leant over, because the way you stop is you stop with the rear of the vehicle facing back, because that then protects the driver and the commander. But I wanted to put some rounds down, so I next to the gunner who was firing the 50 cal, I fired my UGL and a stun grenade launcher and popped a round right into the firing point. So if he was still there, he would have definitely got smashed.
Wow,
I see the explosion, because there was no roof on this building. It was like an old shanty building thing, and he would have probably had shelter from the rounds hitting the side of the wall, but I popped a grenade into the wall inside the building, and yeah, hopefully that got him. But yeah, we just did a contact drill out of that area, then went firm, and then just continued on from there.
Was that your most kinetic tour, the 2006 one?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was your first one in country, and it was just...
and I did another one in 2010, and that was busy as well, but probably not as much as the 2006.
And of course, you don't know at the time whether that, for all you know, the next one could be even worse.
Yeah, and the next one was busy, and we did, like I say, a guy was killed in my platoon in 2010, and guys were injured, wounded and stuff, but even though we had more casualties, I think 2006 was busier, to be honest.
Yeah,
it was the first big kick-off tour,
On a slightly trivial question I've asked others, just let's say it all kicks off and you are either reactivated or realist because it's all kicking off, and you can choose any weapon you like, but it's like but it's part of the British Army.
Yeah.
So what weapon would you choose?
What, one that's in service or anything?
Oh, let's say anything then. Anything, yeah.
So I like the old Heckler Koch rifles personally.
Okay.
And
awesome.
HK 416 or 417 would probably be a nice weapon. And they've got a new one, I think it's called a 433, HK 433. That looks like a lovely rifle. So, yeah, one of those.
Yeah. Rather than a light machine gun or something like that.
Well, the thing is, with a light machine gun or a GPMG, that would be a role-dependent weapon.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like everyone would just carry a GPMG, but a GPMG is a mega weapon.
Yeah,
I love it. And funny to say about being reactivated, I've literally just re-enlisted into the reserves.
Oh, have you really?
Yeah, I'm back in 4 para now.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, that's a scoop. That's fantastic. So, because are you what sort of age? I don't know.
54.
54. So that's possible if you've got prior experience for anyone watching. That's amazing. So what sort of tasking are you going to be doing?
I'm going to be a platoon sergeant in the B Company 4 para.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Well, congratulations. Cheers. And the country is a lot better for it, being safer. What do you think about that, Joe?
Great.
Oh, really?
I just think that there's not a lot of experience now, especially in the reserves. There's limited experience. The last time we did a proper warfighting operation was a long time ago now, and I was asked if I'd go back to be like in an instructional type role. I just thought, well, actually, it might help the younger generation if I can pass on some of my experience.
Yeah. So if anyone watching and they're in their 50s, that is an option then, is it?
Well, it depends, I think, on your prior service and how long ago you left. Because I've only actually been out of the reserves for 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the experiences at Kajaki, how did you find out about that? And, did you know some of those guys?
Again, I found out about that just by the int updates and stuff, and then talking to people that had a bit more information. And it's quite a sad incident because it was basically just an old legacy Russian minefield. It wasn't something that the Taliban had laid to try and catch them out or anything. And I knew nearly all the guys that were involved in that. One of them's a very good friend of mine, Stu Pearson. I was actually having a beer with him last night. He lost one of his legs. He nearly lost the other one as well. But yeah, it's quite a sad incident, that, and it just goes to show you, that it doesn't necessarily have to be an enemy action. And when there's things like mines just laying around from previous conflicts, they can be just as dangerous as an IED that's placed intentionally.
Yeah. Right, sort of wrapping up that Herrick IV, 14 dead across sort of the British Army, 46 seriously wounded, like life-changing injuries. The two highest awards of the campaign, Bryan Budd's Victoria Cross and then Mark Wright's, that was at Kajaki, right, at the George Cross. Both earned, not actually for killing the enemy necessarily, even though that maybe in Bryan Budd's case that was part of it.
Yeah.
But if you actually read the, what's the citation, it's actually the fact that they were saving their fellow troops. 20 years on, what are your thoughts about that tour?
It was one of those times where it's the best of times and the worst of times all at the same time. Because I joined the army to go to war. I wanted to go to war. And when we found out we was going to Afghanistan, I was like made up, to be honest, because you knew it was going to be an actual fighting war. It wasn't going to be a peacekeeping operation as such. So I was chuffed with that. And the fact is, we get to see all these things happening and take part in these things like airstrikes and firefights and all that, which was amazing. But then on the backside of it, it was some really tough times, and then you lose good friends, you know.
Yeah.
People like Bryan Budd, very good friend of mine, and he's now, you know, he's not got to see his two girls grow up.
Yeah.
So it's very, very sad.
Yeah.
The best and the worst all rolled into one, really.
Yeah. If you think back on that time where you're besieged, you have no idea, say 5 weeks in, you've got no idea whether you're there for another 5-6 weeks in Musa Qala. Is that like, do you sometimes, regardless of all that hardship, do you sometimes still miss some of the camaraderie or not at all?
Not really, because, you know, I've had 25 years in the regular army where the camaraderie's there anyway, regardless of where you are. In some ways, it was a good thing to go through because, you know, you've tested yourself at a very high level for a long time. And when you've come out of that and done your job properly without faltering and stuff, it's a good test of your soldiering and stuff. But yeah, it's not like I missed having the shits and 50-degree heat and getting kicked, you know, shot at every day. No, not really.
Fantastic. I think we're going to end on that, unless there's anything else that you wanted to, that you think we may have missed.
No, not really. I think I've pretty much covered it.
We'll just recap. Sorry, the first of the events. What are the events coming up?
Okay, so we've got coming up in a few weeks, the 25th of July, we've got the fan dance, which is, we run a summer and a winter one of those. That's obviously the summer one coming up. Then at the end of August, we've got the Escape and Evasion course, which is a 2.5 days in Dartmoor, on the run, being hunted and all that sort of stuff. 25th of October, we've got the P Company event, which is a bit like the fan dance, but a different route. So it's the same sort of distance, but in a very different route. It's a circular route as opposed to a linear route. So that's a great event, and as far as I'm aware, we're the only company actually conducting that one.
And I've done it twice. If you look up on YouTube P Company Trilogy, you'll find hopefully both of those videos up there. That is fantastic. Of the three you've mentioned, I'll definitely be on one. But mate, thanks very much for doing this, and amazing to hear that you're back in service. You know, 20 years on, still sharing your experiences. Yes, so thank you for your service, and thank you for today.
Thanks, buddy.
Cheers, thank you, and thank Joe for the support and helping to carry all these cameras up the hill.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, for those watching, as always, see you in the hills.